the early morning of December 26, 1996, in the quiet, affluent neighborhood of Boulder, Colorado. The streets are still. The house is adorned with twinkling Christmas lights, remnants of the holiday cheer that filled the air just hours before. Inside a sprawling, three-story home on 15th Street, a mother's scream shatters the silence. Patsy Ramsey, a former beauty queen, stands trembling in her kitchen, clutching a handwritten note that will change her life forever. The note, scrawled in black ink across 3 pages, claims that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, has been kidnapped by a small foreign faction demanding a ransom of $118,000, 0 cents. But as the hours tick by, the truth emerges, a truth far darker than a kidnapping. JonBenét isn't missing. She's dead, her small body hidden in the basement of her own home, the victim of a brutal murder that will shock the nation. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey, an 8-year-old pageant star whose death became one of America's most infamous unsolved mysteries. Who killed this little girl on Christmas night? Was it a stranger, an intruder with a twisted motive, or was the killer someone much closer to home? Step into this chilling mystery with me. This is a story of innocence lost, a family under suspicion, and a case that refuses to be solved. Let's set the scene. Boulder, Colorado in 1996 was a picturesque college town nestled at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, a place known for its low crime rate and tight-knit community. The Ramsey family, John, Patsy, and their 2 children, Burke and JonBenét, lived a life of privilege in a 7,000-square-foot home, a testament to John's success as the CEO of Access Graphics, a tech company. JonBenét, just 6 years old, though the video title mentions 8, I've corrected to the accurate age for historical accuracy, was a rising star in the world of child beauty pageants, her blonde hair, blue eyes, and dazzling smile winning her titles like Little Miss Colorado. On Christmas Day, 1996, the Ramseys had hosted friends for a festive dinner, laughter and music filling their home. JonBenét, dressed in a red sweater, played with her new toys, unaware that it would be her last Christmas. The family returned from a friend's party late that night, and JonBenét, tired from the day, was carried to bed by her father. The house fell silent, the Ramseys expecting a peaceful night, until everything changed. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26, Patsy Ramsey called 911, her voice frantic. "We have a kidnapping," she cried to the operator. "There's a note. It says they have my daughter." Police arrived at the Ramsey home within minutes, finding Patsy in hysterics and John trying to remain composed. The ransom note, discovered on the back staircase, was chilling in its detail. Written in black marker on paper from a notepad in the house, it addressed John directly. "Mr. Ramsey, we have your daughter. You will withdraw $118, 0 cents from your account. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter." The note was signed SBC, a cryptic acronym that would later fuel endless speculation. Detectives initially treated the case as a kidnapping, advising the Ramseys to prepare the ransom money while they searched for clues, but something about the scene felt off. The note was unusually long, almost 3 pages, and the amount demanded, $118, 0 cents, matched John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus, a detail that seemed too specific for a random kidnapper. As the morning unfolded, the investigation took a grim turn. At around 1:00 p.m., John Ramsey, accompanied by a family friend, searched the house for any sign of JonBenét. In the basement, a rarely used storage area, John made a horrifying discovery. JonBenét's body lay on the cold concrete floor, wrapped in a white blanket, her hands tied above her head with a cord, a garrote, a makeshift strangling device, tight around her neck. Duct tape covered her mouth, and her skull bore a fracture from a heavy blow. The little girl who had sparkled on stage was gone, her life snuffed out in the most brutal way imaginable. John scooped up her body, carrying her upstairs, his cries echoing through the house. The police, realizing their mistake in not securing the crime scene, were now faced with a murder investigation and a contaminated scene that would haunt the case for years. The discovery of JonBenét's body sent shockwaves through Boulder and beyond. The media descended on the Ramsey home, cameras flashing as the story of a murdered child beauty queen gripped the nation. The autopsy revealed chilling details. JonBenét had died from strangulation, the garrote cutting deep into her throat, but she had also suffered a severe blow to the head, an 8.5-inch fracture in her skull, likely caused by a heavy object like a flashlight or golf club. There were signs of a struggle, scratches on her neck, a stun gun mark on her face, and traces of prior sexual trauma, though the extent was debated. The time of death was estimated to be between midnight and 2:00 a.m. on December 26, just hours after the family returned home. Who could have done this to a child in her own home on Christmas night? The ransom note, the brutality of the crime, the lack of forced entry, it all pointed to a mystery that would unravel a family, a town, and a nation's trust in justice. This was only the beginning of the JonBenét Ramsey case, a mystery that would captivate the world for decades. The clues were confusing, the suspects endless, and the truth buried beneath layers of suspicion and doubt. We're about to dive deeper into the investigation, the evidence, and the family at the center of it all. Stay with me. This story is as cold as the Colorado winter night it began on, and it's only going to get colder. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey wasn't just a tragedy. It was a puzzle, one that baffled the Boulder Police Department from the moment her body was found. On December 26, 1996, what began as a kidnapping case quickly spiraled into a murder investigation, but the crime scene was already compromised, the evidence tainted, and the clock ticking against justice. The ransom note, the condition of JonBenét's body, the lack of clear signs of an intruder, all of it painted a picture of a crime that was as confusing as it was horrifying. How did a 6-year-old girl die in her own home, surrounded by her family, with no witnesses to her final moments? Let's walk through the early days of the investigation, the evidence that emerged, and the mistakes that would haunt this case for decades. The Boulder Police Department's first mistake was treating the Ramsey home as a kidnapping scene rather than a murder scene. When officers arrived at 5:52 a.m., they allowed family friends to come and go, contaminating potential evidence. The basement, where JonBenét's body was later found, wasn't thoroughly searched until hours later, a critical oversight. When John Ramsey discovered his daughter's body at 1:00 p.m., he carried her upstairs, further compromising the scene. Fibers from his clothing transferred to JonBenét's blanket, and the position of her body was altered, making it harder to determine the exact circumstances of her death. The police would later face heavy criticism for their handling of the scene, with experts calling it one of the most mishandled crime scenes in modern history. The autopsy provided a clearer picture of JonBenét's final moments, but it also raised more questions. She had died from strangulation. The garrote, a cord with a wooden handle, tightened around her neck with such force that it left deep marks in her skin. But she had also suffered a massive blow to the head, an 8.5-inch fracture in her skull, likely caused by a heavy blunt object. The coroner couldn't determine which injury came first, the strangulation or the head blow, but both were fatal. There were other disturbing details. Stun gun marks on her face and back suggested she may have been incapacitated before her death, and there were signs of prior sexual trauma, though the extent and timing were unclear. Her stomach contained undigested pineapple, a snack she must have eaten shortly before her death, but Patsy Ramsey denied feeding her pineapple that night, adding to the mystery of her final hours. The Ramsey note became the centerpiece of the investigation and one of its biggest enigmas. Written on paper from a notepad in the Ramsey home with a pen found in the kitchen, the note was unusually long, spanning 3 pages, and filled with odd details. It demanded $118,000, 0 cents, an amount that matched John Ramsey's Christmas bonus, a coincidence that raised eyebrows. The note contained phrases straight out of movies like, "Don't try to grow a brain, John," or line reminiscent of Speed, and was signed SBC, an acronym that has never been definitively explained. Handwriting experts analyzed the note, comparing it to samples from John and Patsy Ramsey. John was quickly ruled out, but Patsy's handwriting showed similarities, though experts couldn't make a conclusive match. The note's tone was theatrical, almost performative, leading some to question whether it was a genuine ransom demand or a staged distraction. The crime scene yielded other clues, but they were equally perplexing. A broken window in the basement suggested a possible point of entry for an intruder, but there was no glass on the floor, and a spiderweb across the window was undisturbed, casting doubt on the theory. A footprint from a high-tech boot, a brand not owned by anyone in the Ramsey family, was found near JonBenét's body, hinting at an outsider. DNA evidence. Touch DNA from an unknown male was found on JonBenét's underwear and leggings, but it was a small sample, possibly contaminated, and didn't match any known suspects. Fibers from a red sweater Patsy wore on Christmas night were found on the duct tape over JonBenét's mouth, raising questions about her involvement. Yet there were no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the snow outside, no fingerprints on the garrote or ransom note, nothing to definitively point to an intruder. The Boulder Police Department quickly focused on the Ramsey family as the primary suspects. John and Patsy, along with their 9-year-old son, Burke, were at home that night, and the lack of forced entry suggested the killer knew the house well. The ransom note written on paper from inside the home further fueled suspicion. Why would an intruder take the time to write a 3-page note while committing a murder? Detectives theorized that JonBenét's death was an accident gone wrong, perhaps a moment of rage within the family, followed by a staged kidnapping to cover it up. Patsy, with her theatrical background as a beauty queen, was seen as a likely candidate for writing the note, while John's calm demeanor raised red flags. Burke, though only 9, was also considered. Some speculated he might have accidentally harmed his sister in a sibling dispute, though there was no evidence to support this. The investigation was a mess from the start, plagued by inexperience, jurisdictional conflicts, and media pressure. The Boulder Police Department had never handled a murder case of this magnitude, and their mistakes, failing to secure the crime scene, not separating the Ramseys for interviews, allowing the family to leave Boulder days after the murder, drew national criticism. The district attorney's office clashed with the police, with some officials believing the Ramseys were innocent and pushing for an intruder theory. Meanwhile, the media frenzy turned the case into a circus, with tabloids branding JonBenét America's Little Princess and speculating wildly about her family's involvement. The evidence was a puzzle with missing pieces, and the truth seemed to slip further away with every passing day. We've seen the crime, the clues, the chaos. Now let's look at the suspects and the theories that have kept this case alive for nearly 3 decades. Stay with me. The mystery of JonBenét Ramsey is about to take a darker turn. By the end of 1996, the murder of JonBenét Ramsey had become a national obsession, a case that gripped the public imagination with its mix of tragedy, glamour, and mystery. The Boulder Police Department had a crime scene, a ransom note, and a handful of clues, but no clear answers. Who killed JonBenét on that fateful Christmas night? Was it an intruder, a predator who slipped into the Ramsey home undetected, or was the killer someone inside the house, a family member hiding a terrible secret? As the investigation deepened, theories multiplied, suspects emerged, and the Ramsey family found themselves at the center of a storm of suspicion. Let's explore the suspects, the theories, and the questions that have haunted this case for nearly 3 decades. The Ramsey family, John, Patsy, and Burke, were the first and most obvious suspects. They were the only ones known to be in the house the night JonBenét died, and the lack of forced entry suggested the killer was familiar with the home's layout. The ransom note written on paper from inside the house further pointed to someone with access to the Ramseys' belongings. Detectives developed a theory that JonBenét's death was an accident gone wrong, possibly a moment of rage or panic within the family, followed by a staged kidnapping to cover it up. Patsy Ramsey became the primary focus. Her handwriting showed similarities to the ransom note, though not conclusively, and fibers from her red Christmas sweater were found on the duct tape over JonBenét's mouth. Some speculated that Patsy, exhausted from the holidays and stressed by JonBenét's bedwetting, a reported issue that night, might have snapped, accidentally killing her daughter in a fit of frustration, then staging the scene to protect the family. John Ramsey, a successful businessman, was also under scrutiny. His calm demeanor in the days after the murder struck some as suspicious, and the ransom note's demand for $118,000, 0 cents, exactly his Christmas bonus, suggested the writer had intimate knowledge of his finances. Some theorized that John might have been involved in a darker secret, perhaps tied to his business dealings, though there was no evidence to support this. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, became a suspect in later years, particularly after a 1999 book by a former detective claimed Burke might have accidentally killed his sister in a sibling dispute, perhaps over the pineapple snack found in JonBenét's stomach, and that the parents covered it up. Burke's behavior in early interviews, where he appeared unemotional, fueled this theory, but there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime, and he was never officially a suspect. The intruder theory, however, gained traction as the investigation progressed. The broken basement window, the high-tech boot print, and the unknown male DNA on JonBenét's clothing all pointed to an outsider. In 1997, police investigated a man named Gary Oliva, a convicted sex offender who lived near the Ramsey home and had a history of breaking into houses. Oliva was seen in Boulder on Christmas night, and a friend later claimed he confessed to killing a little girl, though he denied involvement. In 2003, another suspect emerged, John Mark Carr, a school teacher who confessed to JonBenét's murder in a series of emails to a journalist. Carr claimed he had drugged and assaulted JonBenét, but his confession fell apart, his DNA didn't match, and there was no evidence JonBenét had been drugged. Both men were cleared, but the intruder theory persisted, with some believing the killer was a pedophile who targeted JonBenét after seeing her perform in pageants. A more sinister theory suggested the murder was tied to a larger conspiracy. Some speculated that JonBenét's death was part of a ritualistic crime, pointing to the garrote, the stun gun marks, and the acronym SBBC as evidence of a cult or organized group. Others believed John Ramsey's business dealings might have made him a target, with JonBenét's murder a message from a criminal organization. These theories, while intriguing, lacked evidence and were largely dismissed by investigators. The Boulder Police Department remained focused on the Ramseys, a decision that would later be criticized as tunnel vision, potentially overlooking other viable suspects. The JonBenét Ramsey case became a battleground for competing narratives. The Ramseys maintained their innocence, hiring a team of lawyers and private investigators to defend themselves against what they called a media witch hunt. In 1999, a grand jury voted to indict John and Patsy for child abuse, resulting in death, but the district attorney, Alex Hunter, refused to press charges, citing insufficient evidence. The family's refusal to cooperate fully with police, delaying formal interviews for months, leaving Boulder shortly after the murder, only deepened public suspicion, yet the intruder theory couldn't be ignored, with the unknown DNA and boot print suggesting someone else might have been in the house that night. We've seen the suspects, the theories, the dead ends. Now, let's look at the legacy of this case and the efforts to find justice for JonBenét. Stay with me. The story of this little girl is far from over. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey wasn't just a crime, it was a phenomenon, a case that captured the world's attention and refused to let go. By 1997, the 6-year-old's death had become a media sensation, her angelic face framed by blonde curls and a pageant crown plastered across newspapers, tabloids, and TV screens. The Boulder Police Department's investigation was faltering. The Ramsey family was under siege, and the public was divided. Were the Ramseys cold-blooded killers or victims of a botched investigation and a ruthless media? Let's explore the legacy of JonBenét's murder, the media frenzy that shaped public perception, and the lasting impact on the quest for justice. The media coverage of the JonBenét Ramsey case was unprecedented, turning a small-town murder into a global spectacle. Within days of her death, news outlets descended on Boulder, setting up camp outside the Ramsey home, their cameras capturing every move the family made. JonBenét's pageant photos, images of her in heavy makeup, sequin dresses, and posed smiles, became iconic, fueling a narrative of a little princess whose life was cut tragically short. Tabloids ran sensational headlines. Beauty queen murdered. Did her parents do it? Cable news networks aired round-the-clock coverage with pundits dissecting every detail of the case, often with little regard for accuracy. The ransom note was leaked to the press, its contents dissected on air, while grainy footage of JonBenét performing at pageants played on a loop, cementing her image as a symbol of innocence lost. The media frenzy had a profound impact on the investigation and on the Ramseys. John and Patsy, already grieving the loss of their daughter, found themselves vilified in the court of public opinion. Patsy, with her beauty queen past and southern charm, was portrayed as a stage mother obsessed with JonBenét's success, possibly driven to murder by the pressures of perfection. John, a stoic businessman, was cast as a cold, calculating figure, perhaps hiding dark secrets. The couple's decision to hire lawyers and a PR firm shortly after the murder, standard practice for high-profile cases, was spun as evidence of guilt, with headlines screaming, "Why are they hiding?" The Ramseys' CNN interview on January 1, 1997, just a week after JonBenét's death, only fueled the fire. Patsy's tearful plea, "There's a killer out there," was met with skepticism, with some viewers noting her heavy makeup and John's calm demeanor as suspicious. The media also turned a critical eye on the child beauty pageant world, using JonBenét's involvement to spark a broader debate. Critics argued that pageants sexualized young girls, potentially attracting predators, while defenders insisted they were harmless fun. JonBenét's pageant videos showing her in makeup and glamorous outfits were seen by some as evidence of exploitation, with tabloids speculating that her visibility made her a target. The covers often veered into the lurid, with unfounded rumors of satanic rituals, sex trafficking, and even connections to John Ramsey's business rivals. The media frenzy created a narrative that was hard to escape, shaping public perception and putting pressure on the Boulder Police Department to find a culprit, whether or not the evidence supported an arrest. The legacy of the JonBenét Ramsey case extends beyond the headlines. It became a cultural touchstone, a symbol of the vulnerability of children and the failures of the justice system. The case inspired countless books, documentaries, and TV specials, from the 2000 miniseries Perfect Murder, Perfect Town to the 2016 documentary The Case of JonBenét Ramsey. It also sparked reforms in how child murders are investigated, with Boulder implementing new protocols for crime scene preservation and interagency cooperation. JonBenét's death highlighted the dangers of media sensationalism, with critics arguing that the coverage prejudiced the public against the Ramseys, making a fair trial nearly impossible. The case also raised questions about class and privilege. The Ramseys' wealth and connections allowed them to hire top-tier legal representation, a luxury not afforded to most families in similar situations. For the Ramsey family, the aftermath was devastating. Patsy Ramsey never recovered from the loss of her daughter or the public scrutiny, passing away from ovarian cancer in 2006 at age 49. John Ramsey continued to advocate for his family's innocence, remarrying and writing a book, The Other Side of Suffering, about his journey through grief. Burke Ramsey, who grew up under the shadow of suspicion, filed defamation lawsuits against media outlets that implicated him in his sister's death, winning settlements in 2019. JonBenét's grave in St. James Episcopal Cemetery in Marietta, Georgia, became a pilgrimage site where visitors leave flowers, toys, and notes promising to keep her memory alive. We've seen the media storm, the cultural impact, the toll on the family. Now let's look at the modern efforts to solve this case and the hope that JonBenét might finally have justice. Stay with me. The mystery of this little girl is reaching its final chapter. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey has been unsolved for nearly 29 years, a cold case that continues to haunt Boulder, Colorado, and the world beyond. The 6-year-old's death on Christmas night 1996 remains one of America's most enduring mysteries, a puzzle that has defied investigators, journalists, and amateur sleuths alike. But even as the decades have passed, the search for her killer has never stopped. In the 21st century, advancements in technology, renewed public interest, and a commitment to justice have brought new hope to the case. Let's explore the modern efforts to solve JonBenét's murder, the challenges that remain, and the hope that one day this little girl will finally rest in peace. In 2008, a major breakthrough came, though not the one many had hoped for. The Boulder District Attorney's Office announced that new DNA testing using advanced touch DNA technology had cleared the Ramsey family of suspicion. The unknown male DNA found on JonBenét's underwear and leggings in 1996 was reanalyzed, and the sample was now significant enough to be entered into the FBI's CODIS database. The DNA didn't match John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey, nor any known suspects like Gary Oliva or John Mark Carr. District Attorney Mary Lacey issued a public apology to the Ramseys, stating, "We do not consider your family suspects in this case." The announcement shifted the focus back to the intruder theory, with investigators believing the DNA belonged to JonBenét's killer. But there was a catch. The DNA sample was small, possibly contaminated by the mishandled crime scene, and some experts questioned its reliability, arguing it could have come from an innocent source like a factory worker who handled JonBenét's clothing during manufacturing. Forensic genealogy, the technique that solved cases like the Golden State Killer, has also been applied to the JonBenét Ramsey case with mixed results. In 2019, the Boulder Police Department partnered with a genealogy company to reanalyze the DNA evidence, hoping to identify the killer through distant relatives. The process involves uploading the DNA profile to public genealogy databases like GMatch to find matches with family members who have submitted their DNA for ancestry testing. So far, the efforts have yielded no definitive matches, largely because the DNA sample is so small and degraded. Some investigators remain optimistic, believing that as more people upload their DNA to these databases, a match could eventually surface. Others, however, caution that the DNA may not belong to the killer at all, given the contamination risks from the crime scene. The rise of true crime media has kept JonBenét's case in the public eye, bringing new attention and new leads. Documentaries like The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, 2016, and JonBenét, An American Murder Mystery, 2016, have re-examined the evidence, with some experts concluding that an intruder was the likely culprit, while others point to the Ramseys. Podcasts such as The Killing of JonBenét, The Final Suspects have interviewed surviving witnesses and explored new theories, including the possibility that a local sex offender, known to the police but never thoroughly investigated, might have been involved. Online forums, like Reddit's r/JonBenét Ramsey, have become hubs for amateur sleuths who pore over case files, autopsy reports, and the ransom note, hoping to uncover a clue the police missed. In 2022, a tip from a podcast listener led investigators to re-interview a former neighbor who reported seeing a suspicious man near the Ramsey home on Christmas night, but the lead went nowhere. The challenges in solving the JonBenét Ramsey case are immense. The passage of time has erased key evidence, witnesses have died, memories have faded, and physical evidence has degraded. The initial mishandling of the crime scene, allowing the Ramseys to move JonBenét's body, failing to secure the house, means crucial forensic evidence was lost or contaminated. The media frenzy and public speculation have muddied the waters, creating a narrative that's hard to separate from the facts. The Boulder Police Department's early focus on the Ramseys at the expense of other leads has been widely criticized, with some believing the real killers slipped through the cracks in those first critical days. The unknown DNA remains the best hope for a resolution, but without a match, the case remains at a standstill. Despite the obstacles, there is hope. In 2023, the Boulder Police Department announced they were working with a new forensic lab to reanalyze the DNA evidence, using cutting-edge technology to extract more genetic information. They also launched a public campaign asking for anyone with information about the case to come forward, even anonymously. John Ramsey, now in his 80s, has continued to advocate for his daughter, pushing for the use of genealogy testing and urging the police to release all evidence to independent investigators. JonBenét's memory lives on through her family and the countless people touched by her story, many of whom leave tributes at her grave, promising to keep fighting for justice. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey is a reminder of the fragility of innocence, the flaws in our justice system, and the enduring power of mystery. Will we ever know who killed this little girl on Christmas night? Will her killer or killers ever face justice? The answers may be out there, hidden in a forgotten memory, a lost piece of evidence, a single strand of DNA. So what do you think? Was it an intruder, a predator who slipped into the Ramsey home? Or was the killer someone inside, hiding a terrible secret? Tell me your theory below. Your idea might be the one that finally brings her peace. If JonBenét's story has left you haunted, if her loss has touched your heart, stick around. The next mystery is waiting, and it's just as chilling, just as heartbreaking. We've walked through her life, her death, her legacy. This is where we leave her, not with answers, but with a promise. She will not be forgotten. What do you see in the shadow of JonBenét Ramsey?